Hello, y'all, and welcome back to the channel. Oh, let me fix my little bun here. Marquita here. And today I'm going to be doing a book review. So it's been a while since I've done a book review at all, and life has been lifing. So I have been reading this book for quite some time, and I've been picking it up, putting it down, picking it up, putting it down. But once I have been committing to finishing it, it is pretty lengthy. It's about 400 pages, close to about 350 or so pages. But this was a book that I picked up from Target Book Club. As you can see the sticker there. It is autographed, which is one of the things that I love about Target Book Club books. We love those autographed copies. And the name of this book is In the Time of Our History by Susanne, I think it's Pari or Perry. And before we get into the actual book, a couple things. One, please be sure to like and subscribe so you can see more book reviews and also more content that I post on my channel, because I do way more than book reviews. But also, just a little background on this book and the author. The author is an Iranian American. Her mother was American, father Iranian, and she spent time living in New Jersey and Iran until the Iranian Revolution in 1979. This book, although it is a fictional book, does tie in some of that time period. So, in the time of our history, so this is kind of her, this is a personal story for her, even though it's not her story. It's a similar story in terms of the fact that she had to balance being an American and an Iranian, the cultural differences. She had to balance that because her father was Iranian, her mother was American. So you see that here in the character. So let me read the back. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm just going to read this part in yellow because this is kind of like a good overview, and then we'll go from there. So it says that this sweeping multi-generational saga transport readers into the world of the Jahani family. Iranian immigrants grappling with the future of their traditions as an American-born daughter steps outside her expected role, shaking loose their foundations and their secrets in a novel that poses larger questions about the meaning of marriage, motherhood, and starting anew, even as we long for the place we once called home. So, part of this, I'm going to show you one more time now, put this down, but part of this story has to do with blending or trying to fit in essentially to two cultures. So in the story, we have two sisters. We have Mitra, who's the older sister, and Anita, which we're going to call Anna. That's what they refer to her in the book as most of the time. She's the younger sister. So these are the two sisters that are the main character. Well, they are the two sisters in the book that our main character family is from our main character family. Anna is the younger sister who is what you would say the perfect daughter in the sense, in the Iranian sense, in terms of the culture. She, she's okay with getting married, in arranged marriage, or getting married in general. She found someone she wants to marry. That's within her culture. And her dad approved. So what he wanted, because Mitra was very anti a lot of the traditions when it came to women's roles and what women were made to do. For example, the school that they went to, like graduation, they were not allowed to wear pants. They were supposed to wear like dresses or skirts. Mitra wore a pantsuit. So though she's been a rebel against culture, her culture, the traditions when it comes to women's roles in that culture, you're from day one. That's not her thing. She has no desire to be married. She just wants to live her life and do whatever. But her father is also very stubborn. So essentially, you have a father and a daughter who are very much alike, and that's what causes a lot of their struggles. Neither wants to give, and neither wants to follow what the other wants. So Mitra's way of getting out of being married, because what her dad did was say, okay, Anna's found somebody she wants to marry. The only way I'm gonna let her get married is if you get married. So she would have had an arranged marriage. And Mitra was like, one, I don't want to get married, and definitely don't want an arranged marriage. So Mitra goes and gets her tubes tied so that she cannot have children, which, if you're not familiar with Iranian culture, that is one of the things that is, a plus to, make sure that you could say valuable or um, an acceptable bride. So it's not that she could not necessarily get married, but she wouldn't be prime pickings, let's just say. She wouldn't be top draft pick. And so she knew that for the case of the person that her dad was trying to marry her off to, that having that arranged marriage, like the family, his family, would not go for that because she wouldn't be able to have children with that operation. So that's how much of a rebel and how extreme she would rebel against her father. So she went and did that. And she knew that not only would that keep her from having to get married, but it would also allow Anna to get married still, because he tried to tie those two together. But what Mitra knew is that he wouldn't suffer the embarrassment, because her dad was very big on appearances, I guess you could say, in his community. So he would not suffer the embarrassment of having to cancel two weddings, because he would have to cancel Mitra's. That was already an embarrassment. But he definitely wouldn't cancel Anna's too, because that would be just a big shame, big embarrassment. So that is the type of stuff that Mitra did. And that's kind of an idea of the relationship that her and her father had, Mitra and her father. But again, Anna was like the perfect daughter. She got married. She had two kids. And then unfortunately, as we know, and it tells you on the back of the book, so I'm not giving anything away, is Anna ends up dying, and you also lose the children. So Anna and her children end up dying. And at this point in the book, it is approaching their 1 year, or it is her 1 year anniversary of their deaths. And Mitra also, in her rebellion, I don't know if I mentioned this, the family is based in New Jersey. Like everybody else is kind of like in New York, New Jersey area. And Mitra has flown the coop over to California. So she's in the Bay Area in California, and she's coming back to New Jersey for the family gathering, the celebration of the 1 year anniversary of Anna and the children's death. And that is like a cultural thing. So she's coming for this cultural celebration. So, of course, she really doesn't want to come back for a few reasons. One, her and her dad are not on good terms, so she's not excited to see him. Two, she's still mourning her sister. So, this is just like another slap in the face, a reality to say, like, my sister's not here anymore. My niece and nephew are also not here anymore. And that's the thing, is that Mitra, even she kind of ran away from all of that when she went to California. Like, she distanced herself from her family. It's not that she never talks to them. Like, her dad disowned her after the whole stunt with the wedding and all that. And then she had been going to school for architecture. Her dad has an architecture business. And so she was in college for that. She, had that, picked up that love for it just like him. And they got into it over something, and he pulled the funding, so she did not graduate. I think she had like a year or a semester or something like that left. And so although she didn't finish college, she was able to successfully start like a, kind of architecture design business or whatever. So she basically flips or remodels houses, and that's what she does for her career. So she has her own business doing that. But she has to come back to New Jersey for this 1 year anniversary. And so she has all kinds of feelings and emotions about this. And Mitra's also someone who likes to kind of suppress her emotions. Like, she doesn't show a lot. She doesn't like to show a lot of emotions. So there's that as well. Like, she's trying to kind of hold it all together, because she doesn't want her family to see that. Because I think to some extent, she may view that emotional piece as being a sign of weakness. So again, very much like her father. Her father is also like this. He doesn't show a lot of emotion either. And it's funny how much they are alike, but how that also causes them, it's almost like magnets, they repel each other. If you put the two same ends together, that's Mitra and her father. Like, they're so much alike that they can't get along. And they also both have very strong views on both sides. So like, Mitra has a very strong like view on being against a lot of the traditional pieces when it comes to like a woman's role and what's expected of women. And her father is the opposite. He wants that tradition. He's trying to keep his family in that Iranian culture and tradition, even though they're here in America. And so that's kind of the battle that we see. And I think that's a good thing to point out, because that's a battle that a lot of immigrants probably deal with. So even though someone has been in America, even if they've been here all their lives, like, it doesn't mean that they have completely disowned or forgotten about who they were or who their family, because in this case it's like, Mitra and them were born, they were raised here, but it's not like her parents were grown when they came over to America, so they had lived a life under the Iranian culture, and it wasn't a bad thing until the revolution started occurring. And they had money; they were doing very well over in Iran. But when the revolution happened, as with most revolutions, the wealthy people are the ones that end up typically falling or crumbling or having to leave. And in this case, they had to leave for their safety and start all over in America, which they did, and they did well. But it's just something to remember when people come over from another country. I think a lot of Americans have ideas like, oh, you came to America because you want something better, and now you're here, and blah, blah, blah. Sorry, guys, my mic fell out there. But what I was saying is that when we think about immigrants, we think like, oh, people come to America, now you're ready to be American. And it's like, you're not going to be, you know, Iranian anymore. You're not Mexican anymore. You're not, Colombian or Brazilian or Honduran or wherever you came from. Like, you're not that anymore. And that's just not true. Like, you can come over here and immerse yourself in American culture and assimilate and do all of that. But it doesn't mean that you are going to just completely disown your culture in your country. So I think that's something that we don't think about, regardless of why people come here, whether it's for just better opportunities, meaning that their country is not in a bad situation. It's just there are better opportunities here, whether it's just by choice or whether it's by force, meaning they're fleeing for safety, for their life, that type of thing. um, People still have love for their home, even if you don't agree with everything that's going on, if you don't agree with the culture or all aspects of the culture, it doesn't change who you are. And so you see that battle. Each character in this book has an internal battle or internal structure. And I thought that was kind of unique as to how the author wrote that, because at first you don't necessarily pick up on it, but as you get introduced to not only the main characters, but some of the other characters, you see that they all have some form of internal struggle or conflict. And the one good thing about this book is that it does resolve those internal conflicts from, I would say, for most of the characters. The only thing that I would have liked to have seen is a little bit more closure on the bigger picture of the story. So it's like, it doesn't leave you hanging per se, but it's like you kind of want to see what those resolutions look like, if that makes sense. So like we see even Yusuf, which if you when you read this book, you're not going to be a fan of Yusuf for most of the book. But once you do become a fan, like, and you understand him, you will definitely be a fan of his, I think. Because his revolution or his resolution, um, or resolution of his conflict, I think was one of the biggest, and it showed so much because it helps you understand the person you saw earlier or most of the book. Because his revolution don't come to, go ahead and throw that in there, doesn't come to very, very close to the end of the book. But I think once we see it, it gives us an understanding of who he is, because all of the characters end up reflecting on some things. And I think they kind of do like a self-evaluation. It's like, why am I like this type thing? And once they see that and make the connections and reflect on, different events that led them to being the person that they are, whether it be a positive or negative, that helps them in some way, in evolving. So I love the way that part plays out in the book. And I think, again, the author did a good job of giving us that. So again, the only other thing I want to mention is the characters, just a few other things. When it comes to Mitra, we kind of look at the book through her eyes. Like, majority of the book is written from like Mitra's perspective. We do see other people's perspective here and there. We see Yusuf's perspective from time to time as well. But I think Mitra is who, it's like we're reading this through Mitra's eyes, essentially. And one of the other things when it comes back to this book is the way that they view, or that Mitra views, her parents and marriage, and how that ties in. So Mitra is part of the reason why she's so rebellious against the marriage and motherhood and all those things, and just kind of the traditional role expectations, is because her parents' marriage was not ideal when it came to what people would probably want, especially here in America. But just as a woman, like it wouldn't necessarily be an ideal marriage that I would want to be in. And that's where I think that's something I think a lot of people can relate to, men and women. Your parents or the people that raised you are typically the first relationship that you see, whether it be a marriage or whatever. And so if that's a negative, then that's kind of going to influence until you become old enough to kind of have your own experiences or whatnot. But it may hinder you from having some experiences or be make you afraid to step out there, because if you've seen a negative marriage, like let's say you saw abuse, or maybe even felt like it wasn't necessarily abuse like physical, there's also emotional and mental. Or if you looked at one parent maybe as being the weaker parent because you feel like they're not standing up for themselves, they're not they don't seem to have a say in the relationship, meaning what one person says goes and the other person doesn't really get to have an opinion or any power in the relationship, is not balanced, then that can impact how you view marriages and relationships. And so I think we see that as well. And I think for Mitra, because her father, of course, they were very traditional in that sense, her parents. And so the mom she doesn't work. She's not super educated. She's not dumb by any means. And I think that's something that also people have a misconception, is just because a person isn't book educated or didn't go very far, that they aren't that smart or they aren't capable of, doing more than just certain levels of things. But Mitra's mom is not dumb, but she is like the traditional housewife from their culture. Like, she had the children, she cooks the husband's food, she makes sure he has food, his clothes are done, whatever, and she also doesn't do things without his permission, in the sense of, she doesn't wear makeup. They're very conservative. So she doesn't wear makeup or a lot of makeup. She doesn't change her hair, without running it by him. Like, she wouldn't just go get a haircut without speaking to him about it, like saying, I think I want to cut my hair. Like, would that be almost asking his permission, essentially? And if she were to do those things, like, he would say something nasty to her, meaning like, he would get angry, or it would cause an argument, or it would just be, he would just insult her in all these ways. And so I think Mitra, growing up seeing that, has this idea. And so, one, she's fearful of ending up in that type of situation, which is one reason why she was rebellious against the arranged marriage. And two, I think that also impacted how she looks at just being a wife. And I think she looks at her mom as not having any kind of identity outside of being Yusuf's wife, or her mother. She doesn't have anything for herself. Like, she doesn't have a job. She doesn't have any independence, in a sense. Like, the dad makes the money. He controls the money. He controls how the mom looks and things like that. So again, he's not like physically abusive or anything, but he is mentally and emotionally abusive. But I don't think he knows that. Like, in his mind, it doesn't process that way. It's not, it's just that that's just the way it is, or has been for, traditionally. And so I think that's why he behaved in the manner that he thought was the way he's supposed to, and how the expectations that he had of his wife and his daughters was based on, tradition. It wasn't modernized. And so I think that's something to take into consideration as well. And the last thing I want to say as we close out this review, I guess you could say, is that it really gives a look into the life of, this is specific to, Iranian culture, but I think it's something that we can think about or look at, because the US and the Middle East has a relationship, and has had a relationship for quite some time. And I don't think a lot of people realize the history in the Iranian and US relationship, because we just kind of know from maybe like the President Bush era, and like, we think of September 11th and we think about oil and those types of things, but we really don't know, a lot of people really don't know the true history of the relationship, and also how some of the previous presidents, like how it goes further back when you're talking about the Iranian Revolution, and further, like how all that in America tie in. So what I would recommend as well, if you're interested in that and you just want kind of like a quick rundown from the viewpoint of somebody who was living it as a child during that time, that you look at the book Persepolis, and I'll put a photo of that book up there as well. It's a graphic novel, so it reads like a comic book, and it's written. The author wrote it from her perspective when she was a child. She lived it. So it's like her story, but from her eyes or through her eyes as a child when it was happening. So it is very easy to understand like what's going on. And I think the illustrations also help as well. I taught that book with my high school students and they really enjoyed it and it opened up a lot of conversations about um, what happened during that time period. So I think that will be a good book to help you kind of understand some of the pieces in this book as well if you're just not familiar with the Iranian culture, the revolution, and how that impacted um, Iranians during that time, and also the connection that the U.S. has to the country as well, outside of what we tend to know right now. But I think the last question I want to leave us with, well, there's a couple questions. There's one discussion question. And that's another thing to point out. This book also has discussion questions. So if you want to use this as a book club book, if you're using it to teach, as a teaching point or whatever, there is a reading group guide here in the back. I love when authors do that because the questions that they ask help us also understand where a lot of times where they were going when they were developing books and their thought process. And I think it's good to compare like what we got out of it versus what maybe the author was intending for us to get out. So it's nice to see those perspectives. But there is one question that I think is really good. She does talk about the relationships of America and Iranian Revolution. Um, and it she asks you, the reader, or the person, whoever would be uh, the recipient of the question. But you, as a reader, you could think like, can you imagine yourself in a similar situation? Meaning that this story is about an immigrant family. Most of whose members have resettled in the U.S. because of a revolution that gave rise to a brutal regime in Iran. Can you imagine yourself in a similar situation? How do you think you would cope with exile and migration to a foreign country? Many of the Jahanis cling to old traditions in order to retain a sense of belonging. What beliefs and norms would you try to preserve? So I think that's a good question. And that's how I want to end this review, is just leaving you guys to think about that, because I think we forget what it's like if you had to just uproot your life from what you've always known and go somewhere completely different. How would you hold on to your old life? Like, what if you were running from, say you left because it was dangerous for you or your family to be there for whatever reason? Like, what parts of your tradition would you hold on to? Because even in the Iranian tradition, and their religion is like a Muslim religion. So if you know anything about that and how, women's roles, because we really want to focus on the women and how they're treated, and what the expectations are for women in that culture, because that is a big part of this book. Um, what would you keep and what would you maybe say, I'm glad that I'm not having to deal with that anymore? Because Mitra was kind of that person where she did hold on to some traditions, like, when they had guests from her community, that type of thing. So she didn't just completely throw it away, but there were parts that she didn't agree with, and she was using her uh, ability to be, an American woman and have the freedoms, some of the freedoms that wouldn't have been provided to her if she would have still been in Iran and living under the role of a traditional Iranian woman. So just thinking about that, like, are we really that different? Because I think one of the things that happens when we think about the Middle East and we compare ourselves, meaning America or Americans, to Middle Eastern people and some of the cultural and moral beliefs, we try and say like, oh, like they're so horrible. Like, especially when it comes to women, look how restrictive and conservative they are and how harsh they are. But then let's think about our current political situation. Like, what's up for grabs right now, depending on who ends up in office. Like, things that Congress have been talking about, even in the past 8 years, the things that have been reversed regarding women's rights to our bodies, to our just very well being. And then we think about some of the Iranian and Muslim restrictions, the parts that we say are not fair to women. Are we really that different? That's something to think about. So I would recommend this book. It's very thought provoking. I enjoyed it. And like I said, I will say, It is something that probably will take a little bit to get into. It's not one that you're going to read the first few pages and be like sucked in, but give it time. And I think that you will enjoy it if you do enjoy books that have historical context, if you enjoy thought provoking books, and if you enjoy books that deal with, blending of cultures, blending of families, anything like that, or more so cultures, not so much families, but blending of that, and just kind of uh, anything that deals with women's rights, all of those things, then I would recommend this book to you. Or if you're just curious, and again, I got this from Target. I bought it in store. There's a Target book club book, and I got an autographed copy. I can't enunciate today, but I got an autographed copy because those are things I like to collect. But I would recommend that you do, pick it up or get it on Audible or whatever makes you happy. But it is a good book, and it is thought provoking, especially with some of the things that are on the docket right now when it comes to being a woman and politics and what that can mean. And again, I leave you with the question, are we really that different compared to, in this case, the Iranian culture, to the Muslim culture that is practiced within that community? Are we really that different? Thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe. And if you read this book, please put some comments down below. Let me know what you thought of it. And if you had any of the same um, thoughts and revolutions or whatnot that I had, and how you felt about the book altogether. Thank you so much. See you next time.